Well, perhaps we should start. Welcome everybody to another presentation out of the Center for Cultural Identity and Education. I'm Handel Wright, I'm director of the center, and I'm very pleased today to have Michael Hoechsmann with us. Well, most of you are here because you've already read the blurb, so you know about the title of his talk and you know a little bit about him. But I'll just reiterate a few things maybe. I actually thought, because this is post-CSSE and just after the end of the academic year, there'll be like 4 of us around the table talking tonight. So this is really good. So we very quickly run out of lunch, of course. Michael, well, what we don't have on here is Michael did his PhD at Moseley, which is where I got to know him. But he's no stranger to Vancouver. Michael actually grew up in Vancouver, went to school. He's currently an assistant professor in the Department of Integrated Studies in Education at McGill. And Michael works in a lot of areas related to media studies generally and cultural studies and the intersection of media studies and cultural studies. And his work has appeared in various journals as outlined in the little blurb we have here. And today, I don't want to take up too much time. Michael's talk is going to be on youth and media, literacies old and new. And before we start, I just wanted to, again, this is coming out of the Center for Cultural Identity and Education, and Carolyn Wilcott is working with me. She's on the GA. So Michael, without much ado, over to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Handel. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. As Handel said, I grew up in this area. I was actually dismissed from University Hill Secondary School here in grade 9 after excessive absences. So it's always a pleasure to come to UBC, and I've only been here once before. That was about a decade ago. And as well, it's interesting for me to finally meet Peter Seixas, who was a school teacher at the alternative school that I ended up at, Global Education. And I think once gave me some encouragement about some writing I'd done, some little writing contest. That was the one interaction that we had, and he told me I'd won it, which I didn't really believe. But it helped give me some courage again. It's also great to be with Handel, who really was one of the reasons that OASI was a great experience, because I used to say to people, well, what was really good about OASI was the interactions in the hallways and what the activities that occurred around classes, not in classes. And I think you here at UBC are very fortunate to have someone with this talent and background. It's really great. And by the way, this event is being sponsored by the Center for just in case you forgot. And I know several other people in the room, but I would like to point out that maybe if I do appear nervous, it's because my father just walked into the room. Klaus Hoechsmann, who is a retired retired mathematics professor, but also still involved in PIMS, the Pacific Institute for Mathematical Studies, and makes me quite proud with sort of the popularizing math work that he does, which is always very exciting. So, with that extensive preamble, what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about what I do and give you some idea of the projects, and then I'm going to do, I'm going to read a portion of a paper from a forthcoming book called Reading Youth Writing, which I'm preparing with Bronwyn Lowe, who actually also has a UBC connection. She did her master's degree here in this faculty. But I will entertain you first. What we're just going to have a quick look at here is a piece of media production by a McGill student, someone in the Faculty of Education. I'd just like to give you an idea of some of what we're producing or what the students are creating in their training at McGill. So this was part of a digital autobiography project, and that piece is up on YouTube and has actually got quite a lot of attention. And it's just a sample of some of what we're doing in the media and technology course that I'm involved with. We have a course, it's a required course for the teachers in training that crosses between educational technology and also the media education, media literacy. And so it's quite a rich, it's an overwhelmed course. There's so much going on in it, but we're doing that traditional media education, the critical reading of advertising or something in the history of media, etc. What media teachers often call deconstruction, but which I think is an inaccurate use of that word. But whatever the case, we do that old media education, which is, I think, is important because it puts a really critical element into the course. And we put a tremendous focus on production. More and more, the class is becoming paperless. That means readings we're doing online, and most of the course assignments now are digital artifacts of some sort or blogs. And we're working a lot with the Web 2 platforms. That's the new development. I'm sorry today if I seem to be pitching above or below some of your backgrounds, because it is difficult to do this talk without knowing exactly how much everybody knows about the different things I talk about. But the Web 2 is the interactive web. It's the reading and writing web. It's the participatory, collective new web of things like YouTube and Facebook and MySpace, which I'll talk about today, and Wikipedia, other things as well. And so we're trying to use the new potentials in different ways. One of them is simply to give a context of publication or distribution to people's artifacts, but also we're looking at creative ways as well to use. For example, we've used YouTube in a way where students, as part of their preparation for class, will do a course reading, and then they're also asked to choose a YouTube video that might associate with the reading, which they then put onto we develop an area, our own little sort of social network on the YouTube, and people come to class prepared to talk about this, for example. A lot of what we're doing with the sort of the new platforms is still very much in development, but another one I would want to mention is Second Life, which I've started using with graduate students last year, but I'm hoping to try to do something with 120 undergraduates this year with Second Life. But Second Life is a virtual world, and one which is increasingly drawing attention of educators. And I'm not sure to what extent it's always being used well, but it seems to me to have some pretty tremendous potentials for teaching, I think, any forms of learning that have to do with physical space, because one occupies a three-dimensional space. There's also potentials that, for example, UC Davis has one of the areas on Second Life that most I find very impressive, and that is one where you learn what schizophrenia is about, and you do that by actually occupying a space, and you wear a badge as you walk through the building, and while that badge then makes you hear things, and posters change, like the words on things change, and you start hearing voices. So it's a way of experiencing something that is entirely difficult to just express at an abstract level through language. So we're quite interested in that as well. So as I said, though, there's fundamentally we're still starting from a place of media education and embarking into these new domains. And just to give you a sense of some of the projects I'm involved with, I'm doing work in sort of school-based settings, then the nonprofit settings, and then also what I would be calling the sort of informal learning economies. And that's what I'll focus on today. I'm going to talk about the informal learning of users and people who are simply participating in these new domains. But in regards to the other, I'm involved with a youth media organization in Montreal called Image, and we're doing projects where we're teaching young people to use the technology to produce the material, and also to be able to express particular, pretty much social justice type themes. And that, to some extent, I would like to make the one point that there is ways which I'm analyzing different forms of media production in relation to how audience gets constructed and construed by young people in the act of production. And what I'm seeing sometimes, I see the patterns emerge over, by analyzing these different sectors, but in the nonprofit world, I see some of the, really exciting youth production that is somehow socially significant and meaningful. And there's an article in a journal I was co-editor of that actually Stuart and I were just talking about by Elizabeth Soap, who talks about, she has a concept that she uses called crowded talk. And she refers to how in certain learning circumstances, young people ventriloquate back what the adult mentors and teachers are sort of teaching them or encouraging them to say. And I think that's perfectly good and fine in a way, because what I'm seeing is that with a different conception of audience and a different, in the various locations and circumstances, it's a hybrid audience, a youth and adult audience, and also conception of an audience that's listening, like having access to large audiences that in general enables a more serious engagement with social issues. And that in the informal learning economies, what you're going to see is a lot of goofing around, fooling around. And one of the points I'm going to make today is that we can't write that off. That in fact, peer-to-peer communication is often about having a laugh, and it involves sort of showing how goofy or funny one can be. And I was going to show you the video by, I'm not going to show you this whole thing, but on YouTube, the second most viewed video in all time is the Pokemon theme song by Smosh, which is these two characters, Anthony and Ian, in California. viewed video of all time on YouTube with over 20 million views in a year has catapulted these two into a sort of newfound fame. They have their own website where they sell a lot of stuff, and they produce regularly other content of this nature. And this is a very typical piece of youth cultural production in the informal learning spheres, but also in school-based settings. And this particular like perhaps genre that these guys are mobilizing is lip syncing over pop music, and that you will find a tremendous amount of that on YouTube. But for some reason, this one became super famous. And part of what I'm going to argue is that we do nonetheless want to take these instances of youth cultural production seriously, and that means also perhaps taking ourselves a little less seriously, and that wonderful social justice-oriented production that we often insist upon or enable or promote is of tremendously high value, but I don't think that we'll necessarily understand what's going on or have a really good vision of youth voice in this newly enabled era without taking seriously the goofy stuff as well. I'm going to show you one more sample of student work. This one is one that we're quite proud of. And she will help explain something about the affordances of the new genres. I mean, new platforms, sorry. Stupid girl, stupid girl, stupid girl.
Well, basically started about my laptop, but it wasn't an ordinary laptop, it had this camera on it that I just thought was the greatest thing I've ever seen. And there's so many things that are wrong with the world, I mean, about my world, that I just want to share it with everyone else. I filmed myself speaking about what is wrong with the world, my world. I started to do it for myself, and then all these other people that I don't even know, like some of them I don't even know, they start to watch it too. But the whole crazy thing about this is that now I have all these fans that I didn't think I could ever have. And they're really nice and really supportive of me, which I really appreciate, because for the first time, someone's starting to appreciate my art and my talents. I mean, some of them say that I dance really well, which is really nice. And it's always a pleasure to sign my name, Jamie Lee Johnson. I don't really remember the exact number of people that watch my videos, but I think it's about 20,944,893 people that have seen my videos. And that is amazing. That is. I know. I was there. That is amazing. That is so many people. I don't even know how many people that is. I don't even know. I don't know. It's crazy. I was in the number review video of the entire site. And it's the world that watches. The world is watching me. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because the watching going on, and as well as the Gap, have approached me, and they want me to wear their merchandise in my videos. But I said no. Okay, I said no. And you want to know why? Because I'm not a corporate whore. Wasn't it so funny? Jamie Lee Johnson? I mean, I have all these projects. I have all these ideas. I want my creativity to be out there, to touch even more souls that have only been touched by my videos. For example, I have a mug collection that I designed for poor children and underprivileged children. I'm just happy to be giving back to the people that give so much to me, like spending all their time on YouTube watching my videos. Thank you, yeah.
think this student video is, it's a highly reflective piece on and actually, when she's talking about the 20 million number, I mean, we're kind of thinking here of that Pokemon theme song that we just saw, and using sarcasm and some really clever preparation, she's managed to really express what is the conditions of some of these, very famous young cultural producers. So I mentioned the work in the nonprofits sector as rather significant, and I do actually, as I talk, I'm going to try to look to Handel's computer. But what I spent 4 years working in a news agency for youth called Young People's Press, and I did a content analysis of almost 300 articles that we published in the Toronto Star over a 2-year period. And the numbers were very impressive in terms of the type of engagement with socially critical issues. And now reflecting back on that, I mean, I feel that this was an instance of this type of crowded talk that I'm referring to. But again, just to be clear about this, I think this is a very positive thing. It's a really, really good thing. And when young people were, in the case of Young People's Press, we had access to the Toronto Star. We were publishing 3 pages once a week. And once given an audience, and this is central to what I'm trying to say today, given an audience, youth became very serious about what they wanted to express. And so conceptions of audience that's built into the actual production of content have a direct effect in my argument. And the types of issues that were raised had a lot to do with sort of self and other, or self and community. Body image was one of the largest concerns. Diversity and sort of anti-bullying, but getting along, multiculturalism, anti-racism, these were very central issues that young people were expressing. So what I'm suggesting then is that this is not sort of a natural effect of young people given the opportunity to produce something. It's constructed, or it's created, it's co-created by it's a by and with youth sort of adult-youth partnership. And given the conditions of peer-to-peer communication, one sees much less of that very critical and exciting work. YouTube. And I'd just like to, sorry, this was, I was emailed a video yesterday, a video link, and I thought, perfect, this is just what I'm wanting to show, so, yeah. Canadian Council for Refugees Youth Network just released a video that I think is fantastic. And my argument is that this is the type of thing that one sees in the co-creational moments of adult-youth interaction. I don't know if the music is not coming through. I'm going to go back and we'll see this.
Come on! This world going on in everyday places. Faces of all races.
My barrier is to understand what the English.
As a second language, I would like to finish my education. Right. He's gotta go to work, so he's not going to carry you. Can't get a job, because English is barrier. I'll try all the best I can to learn it and try to get help from teachers. Go to university, get a better job to help people.
She's from French religion.
They're like, oh, people are moving here, so even know they want to learn and make them feel comfortable and welcome. I'm asking a question. Speaking of business, hey yo, are you a Canadian?
So, you know, when I say...
I came to Canada because of the war, and I want to stay there because here is safer.
So I wanted to say here too that, you know, that this is a very real manifestation of youth voice as well. So both in that informal sort of sector where youth are often fooling around, and then in the co-creational sites that often in the nonprofit sector, I mean, I'm finding in general some of the best stuff there. You know, in schools there's certain types of constraints around time and also institutional practice, and for now I really do feel that the nonprofit sector is the place that we should be looking for the really exciting emerging work. But I'm saying that in both of these cases we're seeing real authentic expressions of youth voice. And we can't really take one or the other and say, well, that's what youth voice is, but rather recognize that in the context of production and in this sort of the incorporation of audience right into the conceptual work of production, the expectations that are built in before something is even produced. So what I've done is sort of revealed a whole bunch of portions of my paper that I was going to present to you, and so what I'll do is I'll speed through a few sections of this because there's some more video examples I'd like to show you, and I'm sure there's a few points in here somewhere that are of value to add to this context. So the first where I began this particular paper was quoting Time magazine. Time magazine referred to the person of the year of last year as being you know, the you in youth. And the Time magazine cover, I don't know if any of you saw it, but there's a strange little mirror type thing in it, so you can actually see yourself. And Time magazine says, you know, it's a story about community and collaboration on a scale never seen before, about the many wresting power from the few and helping one another for nothing, and how that will not only change the world, but also change the way the world changes. So they're ascribing tremendous capacity and potential to this new technology. We're looking at an explosion of productivity and innovation, and it's just getting started as millions of minds that would otherwise have drowned in obscurity get backhauled into the global intellectual economy. You know, we're still going to drown in obscurity because there's a relational role to how audience plays some role in determining which videos will succeed. And that's something I'm going to talk about here. But the reality is that not every video that goes to YouTube will be seen by a large audience. But the reason I want to say this is that it's very interesting to go to YouTube and to look at, like I've gone through all the different categories that you can find here. But if you ever want to see very visually this sort of tide of production that's moving right through, just hit most recent. And you're actually going to, this is not something I'm going to recommend you do in the school setting, because in fact here you get some sort of internet crud as well, like people are trying to put pornography on here. It takes I think about 30 minutes for the communal vigilance of the YouTube community to shut those down. But in here, you know, you're going to see, like you see 16 minutes ago, I mean, you can actually see, and it's international, it's all around the world. If you, look, there's a language button down there, and you can just select certain languages if you like. But, you know, we'll have a few minutes to kill one day, have a look at this, because here's where it's happening. And you know, obscurity happens later, and obscurity will be a condition of the, you know, the way that the audience, the community of users ascribes value to various videos and not to others. And that can be very arbitrary, because like, I don't know how this Pokemon video got as successful as it did. And for seizing the reins of the global media, for founding and framing the new digital democracy, for working for nothing and beating the pros at their own game, Times Person of the Year is you. So, so I go on then to talk about the new context and the shift in conditions in which having a voice in the public sphere is even possible. I mean, we are at a historical juncture in relation to the history of media, and also you know, the literate practices of a literate culture, which is, you know, where there's a printing press and a series of authenticating and regulating institutions and factors which would determine what is valid and valuable, and you know, what we should be considering truth or what have you, to a sort of free-for-all, apparent free-for-all of knowledge, you know, or of ideas or expressions. We can just put it out there and see what flies and what doesn't. I'm sure everyone's had a chance by now to spend some time with Wikipedia, but you know, Wikipedia is an example of a repository of ideas, of knowledge that was not possible in the old economy. Like, this would never have happened if people had been paid to do it. It wouldn't have become as big and as substantial as Wikipedia. At least this is what Colin Lancashire, who's a scholar in new literacies and he's in residence with us at McGill, he argues this very strongly, that this is the era of give it all away and provide, put your ideas out there, and then things build backwards towards you. There's a book by Don Tapscott and Anthony Williams called Wikinomics, which I'm reading right now, and don't read Tapscott with the notion that he came up with all these ideas, but it's a great book for just getting a really quick snapshot of a whole bunch of examples of participatory media. Anyway, this has now enabled a global audience to communicate across borders and across the street. And you know, that final frontier of the media, the one-way monolithic media flow of media institutions, the big bad media that we've contended with all these years, that is somehow right now changed. And we don't know where that's actually heading. I write some op-eds in the Montreal Gazette. I really quite enjoy that as a writing context. And recently it came to my attention that this woman, Kathy Sierra, who's a technology expert in the US, she was being harassed to the point of terror by people who were threatening her and also just presenting really degrading imagery. They did some photoshopping of her and some just really awful stuff online. She got to the point where she said no more public appearances, and she's not going to have a public presence at all. And so the press got all excited about this, and they were saying cyberbullying, online harassment, and what have you. And I was thinking, well, yeah, I mean, this is absolutely, it's awful, it's atrocious. But this is the conspiracy theorist in me. I was wondering if it really did happen, or if some very powerful interests did it. Like, in other words, was there maybe a manipulation? Like, did some people who really don't want a democratic media environment? I mean, are we going to see a lot more Kathy Sierras in the next little while? Are we going to have these sort of inflammatory media panic moments which are going to make us want to regulate? This is what it does. This was the first thing you look at. I looked across the media, across the continent, and that was the message. It was like, I gotta shut this down. This is out of control. And And so, yeah, the piece I wrote, I said, well, you see a lot more Catholics here. So in other words, I'm saying that, entire sympathy for the incident and absolute, like this is the sort of thing that has to be addressed with an immediacy and seriousness. But I did wonder, like, why this, why now? So there's a tendency to overstate the case and imagine that young people didn't do any writing or video production before the advent of blogging, podcasting, or vlogcasting. And this is where this part of the title, the Literacies Old and New, comes up. One of the, I fear or I'm concerned that we over-ascribe this sort of to the new technologies, we over-ascribe credit or causality for what we then see. Like when you view on YouTube videos or something like that, we somehow have this tendency to confuse the technology with the cultural practice and to say that, in fact, this technology has enabled something. But the reality is that what was there was already there. And in my analysis of the Young People's Press print articles, I see certain continuities to what I see in, like, for example, the CCIE Youth Network video. And that is that the continuity, and this is where there is no rupture from my perspective in relation to this, is that given a space, given an opening, a chance to actually have an impact on a broad public, young people will seize it. Offer them the opportunity, and they will take it. Don't offer them the opportunity, and they'll just goof around, do Pokemon theme music videos. So one of the questions I'm at least struggling with right now is the one as to how changed we really are. And when I'm lecturing to the undergrad students, one of my favorite opening lines for one lecture I regularly do is, we're not as new as we think we are. I think there's just a generalized contagion. There's this concept that we live in a profoundly distinct cultural, historical moment. And heck yeah, we do. But I think we overgeneralize, overstate, overemphasize this. And so that embedded in many of the cultural practices and the media practices or whatever are much deeper, longer standing cultural practices. Now I would have, were I reading this, I would have told you a little bit about some of the statistics. There's the Young Canadians in a Wired World study, that's the Media Awareness Network. They reported that 30% of kids in grades 6 and 7 had their own website. And that 12% of them regularly write and post a blog. And these are statistics from 2005, but they're sort of the most up-to-date Canadian stats. A survey instrument, I don't know how credible it can be, but apparently, according to Aaron Research, the organization that produced this data stands. And the Kaiser Family Foundation in the U.S., they said 87% of U.S. teens were using the internet, and half of those were online daily, and that more than half of teens had created content for the internet, including creating a blog, a personal web page, or sharing artwork, photos, stories, or videos online. This is in 2005, and this is before really the biggest upsurge of activity in Facebook and YouTube had happened. So the numbers are quite substantial. And just on a segue, one platform I'm enjoying, Web 2 platform, is it's called BubbleShare. And BubbleShare is a lot like Flickr, Flickr.com, where you share your photographs. At BubbleShare, you can create very simple little photo voice presentations where there's 6 slots for photographs, and you can speak right into the microphone of your computer and give an audio overlay of 30 seconds. And the reason I mention this as a segue is I think this is a brilliant little platform for classroom work. I mean, I think it's simple to use. It's very, and it's, yeah, I mean, the skill level that one needs is not very high. So I want to recommend that site. Publishare, apparently it's Toronto-based, so it's, you know, you're making Canadian content when you ask your students to get involved there. I'm not going to talk about the folksonomy, but I would have, maybe had I been less blabby at the beginning, I would have read this material. But the folksonomy, I just want to mention the concept briefly. This is the sort of the opposite of a taxonomy system, but a folksonomy is folk-driven classification of knowledge. Wikipedia refers to folksonomy, they say it's a term that specifically refers to the tagging systems within internet communities. A combination of the words folk and taxonomy, the term folksonomy literally means people's classification management. And this is the way that the folksonomy works in sites like YouTube is by the activity of the user. So a user can, by viewing something, will mobilize attention to that particular item. And so with something like the Smosh piece, I mean, you know, it's because 20 million people have looked at it that I'll look at it today. And so the act of viewing is actually already, you're doing something in relation to classifying. Tagging is your capacity to put some key search terms in relation to something. Favoriting, so you just add it to your own favorites, is another way that one classifies. Linking, so linking from your site to the other website is another form. Commenting, I leave a comment on your site. Discussing, wait a minute, am I mixing this up? Commenting and discussing. One is where, like on YouTube, if your video, there's one called One World, and it's the most responded. Yeah, that's it. It's the most responded video. And One World, what happens when they respond is they actually respond in kind. In other words, if I respond to your video, I make my own video and put that up, and that's my video response to you. Versus a comment, which is just writing a comment, right? And bookmarking pages is another way that, where is this? Is another way that sites get get classified. Now this all, the functionalities of all this can be found, I can show you that later, or maybe you're already all familiar with it, but that's just to keep things fun. Let's have a look at One World. And this one, yeah, defies some categorization because, let's tell you what. Responses. It's the most responded to video on YouTube right now, and this one is defying a little bit my categorization earlier, so I'll ignore and pass over that because you wouldn't want an exception to ruin a perfectly good argument. But I mean, it's a really nice campaign. You know, just started by one person, and they're always writing a slogan on their hands, and it's all the hand. You know, it's like. If you want to see them all, it's going to take you a whole afternoon. It's going to take you 6 hours to do it. So while we should remain skeptical of Time magazine's assertion of the many wresting power from the few, the grassroots seizing the reins of the global media, there is an element of truth to it. Certainly we did not take over the profit-making, corporate control side of show business. Nor did we make the big decisions about mass media content far up the corporate ladder. But we did begin to make multiple small decisions about content on a daily basis, both while producing and consuming it. These small decisions began to add up to major influences on what content rose above the rest. Today, the most popular website, vlog, or blog is determined by the number of people who visit it, view it, write a comment, rate it, link it, and follow it on their RSS feed. Marketing has not disappeared, but has become a more inexact science, relying even on the very vagaries of viral communication used by people in everyday interactions. The audience is coming to its own in this new environment. Of course, audience incorporation is of necessity always already a part of the circuit of communication. The Web 2 innovation was to incorporate readers also as writers, allowing readers to write or produce their own texts or shows. While an active audience in times past has been one that uses its imagination, critical faculties, and capacity for sharing with one another, the new audience, Inc. is also a generating audience, an audience of writers or producers. The inherited tradition of an active audience in an era of one-way media flow was of taste cultures. I use that term from Pierre Bourdieu. From the scientific audience capture of Nielsen ratings to the soft science of water cooler buzz marketing, the audience of the past exercised its power by selecting from given choices and ever so subtly inflecting cultural change upon the media by letting its evolving attitudes and worldviews be known. The audience relation to media production in the new environments is far more intimate, and the effect is much more immediately, increasingly embedded or incorporated into the message itself. Much in the manner a flash mob assembles, that's a real-world gathering of people who use instant messaging or cell phones to bring a large group of people together quickly. The new denizens of the Web 2 mobilize audiences to quirky new vlogs, blogs, and web pages. So I want to give you I think this will be my last sample. P. Diddy is the rapper. He put, with Burger King, they put up a P. Diddy video last November, and 750,000 people viewed it within 1 week. And the day after his went up, so it was an advertising thing, he was announcing his new partnership with Burger King and this Burger King channel that they were going to produce on YouTube. Well, the day after he put his up, this woman, Lisa Nova, who's a regular on YouTube, she's one of the people who's one of the presences, this would be one of the personalities, someone we come to know, did a spoof on it. And what you'll see here, everything she's saying is an exact version of what P. Diddy says in his, except that she's going to a local fruit stand. And anyway, this video had within 1 week 650,000 viewers. So P. Diddy's had 750,000 viewers. This one had 650,000 viewers. It's a significant moment in media history that one more crappy piece of sort of corporate output, an advertising campaign, was immediately sort of responded to. There was the form of culture jamming that this, and the capacity today, unlike the past, was that this